Hello, scholars! As you can see, today is Friday and it was also Sunglasses Day last week. Well, today is Friday, April 17th, 2020, and I'm going to take these off because I want to see your beautiful faces right now and I want you to be able to see me. You already know that we have been working on finding external conflict. Conflict is external conflict is when all scholars get ready, go. External conflict is when two characters want opposite things, but they both can't get what they want. Whoa. Today, we are going to keep finding external conflict. I wonder if you're going to be such a good reader and be able to figure out if there is conflict between two characters. I know that we find conflict by seeing if the characters have two different motivations. If they have two different character motivation, ready, go. Character motivation is what the character wants or needs. Yes, we find it if they have two different motivations. If we are able to find and see if they have different motivations and they cannot achieve their motivations, then that is going to be a problem. That is going to be all right, so let's get reading. Oh, my glasses, I gotta go get them. It's Sunglasses Day, here we go. Chapter 8, Penguin's Promenade. Mr. Popper soon found that it was not so easy to take a penguin for a stroll. Captain Cook did not care at first for the idea of being put on a leash. However, Mr. Popper was firm. He tied one end of the clothesline to the penguin's fat throat and the other to his own wrist. "Ork," said Captain Cook indignantly. Still, he was a very reasonable sort of bird, and when he saw that protesting did him no good, he recovered his customary dignity and decided to let Mr. Popper lead him. Mr. Popper put on his best Sunday derby and opened the front door with Captain Cook waddling graciously beside him. "Gaw," said the penguin, stopping at the edge of the porch to look down at the steps. Mr. Popper gave him plenty of clothesline leash. "Cook," said Captain Cook, and raising his flippers, he leaned forward and bravely and tobogganed down the steps on his stomach. Mr. Popper followed, though not in the same way. Captain Cook quickly got up on his feet and strutted to the street ahead of Mr. Popper with many quick turns of his head and pleased comments on the new scene. Down Proudfoot Avenue came a neighbor of the Poppers, Mrs. Callahan, with her arms full of groceries. She stared in astonishment when she saw Captain Cook and Mr. Popper, looking like a larger penguin himself in his black tailcoat. "Heavens have mercy on us!" she exclaimed as the bird began to investigate the striped stockings under her house dress. "It's an owl, and it isn't a goose." Go ahead, look at this picture as I read. "It isn't," said Mr. Popper, tipping his Sunday derby. "It's an attic penguin, Mrs. Callahan." "Get away from me, Mrs. Callahan," to Captain Cook. "An anteater, is it?" "Not anteater," explained Mr. Popper, "and Arctic. It was sent from the South Pole." "Take your South Pole goose away from me at once," said Mrs. Callahan. Mr. Popper pulled obediently at the clothesline while Captain Cook took a parting peck at Mrs. Callahan's striped stockings. "Heaven preserve us," said Mrs. Callahan. I must stop in and see Mrs. Popper at once. I would never have believed it. I will be going now." "So will I," said Mr. Popper as Penguin Cook dragged him down the street. Their next stop was at the drugstore at the corner of Proudfoot Avenue and Main Street. So guys, we're going to pause right here. What is the problem? What is the problem? When I say go, I want you to say it out loud, or somebody that is next to you. Get ready, go. Yes, scholars, I do agree. I do think that Captain Cook wants, or Mrs. Callahan wants Captain Cook to leave her alone. But we already know that Captain Cook is a curious and unusual bird, so he wants to investigate her as much as possible. So let's write that down, scholars. I know that I have to write the problem on this section. So let's go ahead and write it down. All right, I wrote that Mrs. Callahan wants Captain Cook to leave her alone, but he wants to investigate. Scholars, we are seeing two different motivations here. So I want to write right here on the conflict whose motivations are different and who is a conflict between. I want you to say it out loud. Go. You were right. It is between Captain Cook and Mrs. Callahan. Can you tell me why? Ooh, I actually want you to send me that answer either to your teacher so I can give you a shout out. I wonder who I am going to give a shout out to next week. Let's keep reading. Here, Captain Cook insisted on looking over the window display, which consisted of several open packages of shiny white Borg crystals. These he evidently mistook for polar snow, for he began to peck at the window vigorously. Suddenly, a car wheeled to the nearby curb with a shriek of its brakes, and two young men sprang out, one of them being a camera. "This must be it," said the first young man to the other. "It's them, all right," said the second young man. The cameraman set up his tripod on the sidewalk. By this time, a small crowd had gathered around, and two men in white coats had even come out of the drugstore to watch. Captain Cook, however, was still too much interested in the window exhibits to bother to turn around. "You're Mr. Popper of 432 Proudfoot Avenue, aren't you?" asked the second young man, pulling a notebook out of his pocket. "Yes," said Mr. Popper, realizing that his picture was about to be taken for the newspaper. The two young men had a matter of fact heard about the strange bird from the policeman and had been on their way to the Popper house to get an interview when they saw Captain Cook. "Hey, Pelican, turn around and see the pretty birdie," said the photographer. "That's not a pelican," said the other, who was a reporter. "Pelicans have a pouch in their bills." "I think it was a dodo. Only dodos are extinct. This will make an elegant picture if I can ever get her to turn around." "It's a penguin," said Mr. Popper proudly. "Its name is Captain Cook." "Cook," said the penguin, turning around now that they were talking about him. Spying the camera tripod, he walked over and examined it. "Probably think it's a three-legged stork," said the photographer. "The bird of yours," said the reporter. Is it a he or a she? The public will want to know." Scholars, tell me, I want you to say this out loud or even write about this right now. I want you to tell me, why do you think the photographer wants a picture of Captain Cook and Mr. Popper? I want you to say it out loud. Go. Yes, that is a great answer, scholars. What did the story make you think that? Look for your evidence. Go. Good job finding your evidence. Now, I want you to quickly pause. I want you to take a picture of your answer or a quick video of your answer and send it to your teacher so I can give you a shout out. Let's keep reading. Mr. Popper hesitated. "Well, I call it Captain Cook. That makes it a he," said the reporter, writing rapidly in his notebook. Still curious, Captain Cook started walking round and round the tripod to the clothesline. The penguin, Mr. Popper, and the tripod were all tangled up. Well, scholars, look at this. Oh my goodness, tell me one thing that you notice. Go. We are almost done. Let's keep reading. At the advice of one of the bystanders, the tangle was finally straightened out by Mr. Popper's walking around the tripod 3 times the opposite direction. At last, Captain Cook, standing still beside Mr. Popper, consented to pose. Mr. Popper straightened his tie and the cameraman snapped the picture. Captain Cook shut his eyes, and this is the way his picture appeared later in the newspapers. One last question, said the reporter. Where did you get your strange pet? From Admiral Drake, the South Pole explorer. He sent him to me for a present. Yeah, said the reporter. Anyway, it's a good story. The 2 young men jumped into the car. Mr. Popper and Captain Cook continued their walk with quite a crowd following and asking questions. The crowd was getting so thick that in order to escape, Mr. Popper led Captain Cook into a barber shop. The man who kept the barber shop had, up to his time, been a very good friend of Mr. Popper's. Scholars, very quickly, I want you to make a prediction of what do you think will happen in the next chapter. Whoa. That is a good prediction. Yes, scholars, I loved that you used the character traits in order to make predictions, just like we learned in the previous chapters and in the previous skills. Well, thank you so much for reading with me and following along. I cannot wait to shout out all of those great friends. Have a happy Friday, scholars, and I'll see you next week. Bye.